growing up in our house where it was about life is not what you accumulate, it's what you contribute. So my brother's a paramedic, and I went into politics. So that was our family. But they didn't run businesses and things like that, so that was not the environment I grew up in. And so naturally moved towards that, whether it was going to be politics or something like that, I think. But I used to get to spend a lot of time with my dad at campaign times. We'd go out campaigning together. We're putting leaflets in boxes, and I got to spend time with my father, which I liked. Doing that with him was something we shared.
Hi, I'm Karl Faase and welcome to Insight. And these Insights are being recorded in London, where we're here for the ARC conference. And it's a pleasure to be talking to the 30th Prime Minister of Australia. That's Scott Morrison. He was a leader of the Australian Liberal Party between 2018 and 2022. That's an incredibly difficult time to be a Prime Minister. The 2019 to 2020 fires, which were devastating. We also had, that was followed basically by the COVID pandemic. Australian state governments closed their borders. It was incredibly difficult, probably the hardest time to govern Australia since World War II. Let me just say that if you're watching this looking for a hard-hitting political interview, you're watching the wrong podcast. We're talking to Scott about his life and his faith. So welcome, Scott.
Well, thanks very much, Karl. It's wonderful to be with you here. We're all the way in London, but we're all from the same place back in the Shire in Sydney. Most importantly, I used to be a local member.
So. I know. So I've known you for a long time, Scott.
That's true.
Hey, listen, I was just watching you. You were just on the platform of the ARC conference here in London, and you were talking to Danny Abdallah.
Yep.
And Danny and his wife, Layla, lost their children. What was four of their children? A terrible accident with a drug-affected driver.
Yeah.
What was your connection with them? How did that start?
I was Prime Minister at the time. It was the 1st of February, 2020. And this event took place. I remember the day vividly because it was the day we actually shut borders. And I'd been in National Security Council meetings all day. I'd been talking to premiers, other prime ministers and so on around the world. And so I do remember that day. And at the end of that day, as I came out of the meeting, I heard the news about what had happened. This driver out there in Western Sydney in Oatlands had taken out 7 kids, 4 of them killed immediately, 1 with particularly bad injuries and 2 also affected and rushed to hospital. And then this scene, and it was in the Lebanese Maronite community in Australia, and which you know well, and very tight, faithful community. Yes. And so that was just such a shocking event. But I mean, shocking events sadly happen. But what was amazing is that the next day, as there was just this outpouring of grief, Layla comes to the site of the tragedy, and Channel 7, I think it was, went up to her and put a microphone, as they can so sensitively do in things like this, and she responds and she says, "In my heart, I know I forgive him." This was within 24 hours of her losing 3 of her children. And the 4th was their cousin, and Danny's cousin's daughter, Veronique. And it stunned the nation. It stunned me. Yeah. And our parliament was sitting, and Jen went to the funeral because she's like me. I was I had to go to Canberra, and so she went to the funeral, and she connected with Layla and Bridget, the mothers of the children. And she was overwhelmed, and they were so pleased to have Jenny there. And Jenny, Jenny, she just threw her arms around them, and she provided amazing comfort. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. And then I got to meet Danny, and we connected, and and our journey began there as Prime Minister. I mean, one of the most amazing things that happen to you when you're a Prime Minister is you get to meet incredible people. I'm not talking about the Queen and Donald Trump. Mind you, that was fabulous.
That was all right too.
The Queen was pretty cool, and Donald's an interesting character, and I got on pretty well with him, I got to say. But that's not what I mean. I mean, you meet Australians in their worst moment, and particularly then, you went through it. COVID, floods, fires, cyclones. I even told the Queen when I met her, we've even had a mouse plague. I remember I joked one day with Josh Frydenberg, "It's time we let your people go, mate." I think it's, and he got the joke. He got the joke. So did the security officials sitting at the table. But it got to that. So we encountered, Jenny and I, and often on my own, people in their worst moments. Yeah. And often at their best too.
Yes. Yes.
And you really get to see people in a different way. And it's a privilege to be part of those moments. But there are some that just stick with you. And Danny and Layla were one of those. There was another chap, actually, Darren Nation, who was the commander of the bushfire brigade during the summer bushfires, who lost his mates when the trucks rolled down the hill.
Yep.
And Darren and I still text each other all the time, and we've remained connected. We go to the footy together occasionally. And so as a Prime Minister, you get drawn into their world, and sometimes there's a connection. Now, with Danny and Layla, there's a strong faith connection. And I was just blown away by their Christian witness. And so when I left politics, they asked me to come and chair their foundation, which I was pleased to do. And now we promote the idea of forgiveness, hopefully around the world, certainly in Australia. National Forgiveness Day, third Sunday in February, a bit like Are You OK Day.
Yes.
And wanting people to, and Danny put it to the forum today, I'm going to leave you with one question. Who do you need to forgive? And everyone has an answer to that question.
Yes, that is intriguing.
Everyone has an answer to that question, whether they want to answer it or not. They do have an answer.
Yeah.
And the process of dealing with that takes you into a faith space, because the thing amazing about Danny and Layla is they will tell you openly. It's a humanitarian message broadly, but it's Christian inspired.
Yes.
And people say to me, who know I know Danny and Layla, how could they do that? I said, because they love Jesus. That's how. That's what they tell me.
Yep.
How you do it, I don't know. How I do it, I could only do it on that basis too.
I want to say, Scott, as a ex-Prime Minister of Australia, how's your I forgive list going?
Well, Danny asked me that question.
Is that right?
Danny put that question on me.
Yeah, wow.
Because Danny's a former kickboxer. So you're going to answer him. But if anyone can ask you that question.
Yeah, it's a person in that situation.
Him.
Yeah.
And he really pressed me.
Yeah.
And I said, well, mate, the list is a bit long, but I suspect the list of people who need to forgive me is longer.
Now, by the way, I'm not asking you to mention any names, but it's an interesting position.
Yeah. And I've privately worked through a lot of that list, and it has been a blessing to do so.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing about forgiveness is you release the pain, the hurt. See, but sometimes I think people think forgiveness is forgetting or saying it didn't happen. Well, if it didn't mean anything, there's nothing to forgive.
Yes.
But you got to forgive things that have deeply affected you and hurt you or damaged you. Losing 3 of your children to a drunken drug driver is such an occasion. And they also think that it's somehow excusing the action as well. Layla also said, in my heart, I forgive him, but she also said, but the courts have got to do the right thing.
Yes.
And they have this beautiful, and Danny said it today, justice still has to be done, but justice is not vengeance for the victim.
Yes.
Justice is accountability in a society. And when you forgive, you give the justice question to the courts.
Yes.
And you give eternal judgment to God.
Yeah.
And you're hopefully left with a heart that can be filled by his love.
Yeah. Look, there's another layer to Danny's story as well, because you and he talked about on the platform, which was actually that he now sees the driver.
Yes, he does.
And the driver's life has been changed.
It's an amazing story.
Yeah.
Because the guy who was in the cell with Samuel was a Maronite guy, and there was a Maronite priest who used to come and I won't say who that person is but this person believed they were wrongly convicted and all these sort of things, and was going through their own trials and had a deep faith. And that priest brought Samuel to the Lord. And Danny had no contact with him yet. He'd wanted to, and he was going through that process where you have to go through if you want to go and meet the offender and so on. And Danny was working through that, and he always wanted to do it. And when Danny, I remember the day he said, I'm driving up there today, I'm going. And I went, oh, wow. And so we prayed, and so he gets there. And this guy just falls on his feet in front of Danny. And he falls on his feet and just says, I'm sorry. He just issued his repentance. Wow. It was so powerful. And I'm remembering Danny telling me the story on the drive on the way home. But Danny says to him, well, he tells him about his kids, but he said, how did you become a Christian? He said, because I want what you have that enabled you to do that. And so Samuel is not saying, I'm a Christian, let me out of jail. Samuel's saying, I committed these things. I did them. I have to take responsibility for that. and I'm going to be here as long as the system says I have to be here. But I've found God, and he's faithful about it. And Danny and he have mass together. Their kids pray for him. And when you think about the transformation of what that could have been, and Danny talks about it. I mean, as I said, Danny's a kickboxer. He's a seriously guy. He's got a lot of pretty tough mates too. I've met them all. You wouldn't want to mess with them. But he chose. He says forgiveness is a choice, not a feeling. Yeah. It's so powerful. Yeah. And so he chose to do that.
Yes.
And it transformed his life, his kids' life, his marriage. It changed his broader family, who Jenny and I have the privilege to know really, really well now and love them. But it's changed Samuel's life. Danny sent Father's Day gifts to Samuel's father. Mm. So when you forgive, it's not if you've forgiven. Yeah. You follow through. Now, it doesn't mean there's always reconciliation. Sometimes you can forgive people and they will never. Yep. Okay, so you'll benefit from that. But reconciliation happens when there's repentance and when there's forgiveness.
Scott, what caused? Did you remember, growing up thinking I want to be a politician? Like, was that, or a political life, or public service? What was that?
My dad was a local mayor.
Yep.
And my father was very busy. He's one of those people who, an obsessive contributor to community, compulsive. Yes. And my mum was the same, whether it was in church, whether it was in their youth organisation, which is a Christian youth organisation, whether it was the council, or Dad was a police officer. And so while he never said that, I'm the politician, so I can put the words to it. And I said, growing up in our house where it was about life is not what you accumulate, it's what you contribute. So my brother's a paramedic. Right. And I went into politics. Yes. So that was our family. But they didn't run businesses and things like that. So that was not the environment I grew up in. And so naturally moved towards that, whether it was going to be politics or something like that, I think. But I used to get to spend a lot of time with my dad at campaign times. Right. We'd go out campaigning together. We're putting leaflets in boxes, and I got to spend time with my father, which I liked, doing that with him. And it was something we shared. And my brother hated politics. And so, Dad would be at work. The constituents, there was no stipends for councillors back then or anything like that. It was a voluntary thing, and so all the constituents would ring in the afternoon when I got home from school. My brother wouldn't answer the phone; he'd make me do it, and so I effectively became my father's electorate secretary, taking down all their problems and listening to them on the phone and talking to them and handing them off to Dad when he'd come home. And so I suppose he sort of unwittingly gave me the bug.
It's kind of like a very early education in the whole process of politics.
Well, what it was, because my father wasn't a Liberal or he was an independent member of council. Now he voted Liberal. He'd vote Liberal like if his life depended on it. Yes. But he was he always saw community politics as community politics and didn't see the role for partisanship in local government. And so for me, that was a fairly pure viewpoint into politics, which was very community grounded. And I suppose that I hope I carried that into what I did locally, which I liked and loved, and that ultimately gave me the opportunities to do other things in politics. So, there was no doubt about which side of the fence I was on, I suppose, and nor was there with him. But at the same time, he showed me politics through the lens of service, not fame or power.
Power or influence. Yeah. The faith part of your life, how did faith and Christian faith become more important for you?
Mum and Dad both, faithful Christian people, and very practical, faithful Christian people. They lived it. That was their service. Their service was an expression of their faith. And they ran Boys and Girls Brigade, which wouldn't be that fashionable today. I think it's quite popular in Singapore still. I'm not sure, but that was a uniformed Christian boys' organisation. Actually came out of Edinburgh. And so I went along to that, and we were involved in our local church, and I was away at one of their big camps down in Melbourne, and that's when I gave my life to the Lord, and it hit me like a brick.
Yeah, and fabulous.
I can't remember what the pastor said or the preacher, whoever it was. Might have been good, might have been terrible. I don't know. I just found myself on my feet at the end of the meeting, and I had no doubt about what had just taken place. Now, not everyone, as you know, Karl, has that experience.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think we have to be careful about judging people's relationship with God. and how it forms. People have different stories. It happens over time, and if you grow up in it as well, it's almost like from
Yes.
And at some point, you realise that your parents' faith has become your faith, and that's what I try and talk to my kids about as they get older. They can't have my faith. Your kids can't have your fath. They've got to have their own.
So, what denomination were you involved in then?
Back then, it was Presbyterian we grew up in.
Yes.
And then it went Uniting. And then my brother, mates, went to this. They had a youth group thing, and just around the corner from where we lived in Bronte. And I knew a lot of the kids there too. And so I ended up. There was just more kids our age and more friends there. So we decided to go there. To their youth, and we had a lot of fun there. And that's where I met my wife, Jenny.
Yes.
When we first met, we were very young, but when we started going out when I was 16, and Jenny used to go to this was an open Christian Brethren assembly. Yes. They just call them community churches now. But there was another one over in Oatley where Jenny went, and there was a connection between the two of them. We used to do a lot of things together, and that's how I met Jen. And gosh, that was what? Well, as I said, I was 16. So what am I now? I'm 58. It's a long time ago.
How long before you decided that marriage was the way to go?
Oh, within about a week.
There are laws about getting married at 16. So when did you get married, Scott?
I had a real sense of it. I remember saying it to the camp pastor.
Yeah.
And I said I just had a sense of this. And time had to play out. And, we got married when I was 21. Jenny had just turned 22. And in politics, it puts enormous pressure on marriages and family life, and we had our own challenges with having kids and all those sorts of things. But frankly, big challenges of living a public life.
Yes.
And Jen is not a very public person. It's not her natural way of things. She's a very kind, generous, behind the scenes sort of person. Just likes to love people, and so politics. That's not often that world. It's not something that you describe in that way, and so I think that was hard. She was raising effectively two little girls after a very long wait, with a husband who was away constantly in politics in Canberra and various other things, and it was hard.
How long into your marriage did politics start taking a lot of time? Were you at 22 already in local politics or anything?
No, actually, no. I was just I was working in town, building a career I was a research economist. I always thought, but then I sort of in that business, in that organisation, sort of gravitated towards the politics side of what they were doing, and found myself in Canberra a bit, meeting people and so on. And I got to meet Bruce Baird, who actually was one of my I really admired him.
Yes.
He didn't know who I was. And he worked for an organisation, and he offered me a job to come and work with him. And that was back in 1998, I think. And, Bruce and I have been dear friends ever since. But the thing I learnt from Bruce was, and a bit like with John Anderson and a few people like that, I remember, I think you might have interviewed John Anderson.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure I was there. I've seen John Anderson interviewed a number of times back then, but I'm pretty sure it was you were the interviewer. And both John and Bruce showed me, they didn't teach me, they showed me that you could be a Christian in politics.
Yeah.
And you could have a marriage, you could have a family, you could have a faith, and you could serve. And you could, be successful in it.
Yeah, it's intriguing. That's an interesting observation, because both of them have strong in all of those areas.
Yes.
Their families and, for those within Australia would know those names.
Yeah.
And
not without challenges, of course, but that's the point.
Yeah, that is. Yeah. When did you decide then to go for a local? Because that's when you went for Cook.
Yeah, eventually I knew. Bruce and I had some discussions about what he may or may not do, and I thought at the time had come, and I just felt time was right, and I eventually ended up. It was a pretty messy pre-selection. You'll probably recall. You would have seen that in the local papers.
I did remember that. Yes.
And I emerged through the middle ultimately after a Supreme Court case and a few other things. Not that I was party to it.
That became a bit of a theme of your life, emerging from the middle.
I don't know. People probably have observed. I've never been one who's been a member of the tribe, and that happens to some people in politics. I find the tribalism politics stultifying.
Yeah.
And because you have to conform to what that tribe expects of you all the time. And frankly, I don't agree with my politics on centre right politics, socially extremely conservative.
Yeah.
Frankly, far more than many conservatives pretend to. I think the true measure of a conservative is how they live, not what they say. But then on other issues around economic policy or things like that, security policy, you just got to be open to what the answers are.
Yeah. Rather than sticking with the kind of party line. There's a few things I want to ask you about.
I'd say the tribal line.
Yeah,
within parties, which is becoming even harder.
Yeah. There's a couple of things I wanted to ask you about, but go back to something you're already talking about, which was that having a family didn't come easily. What was that like?
It was awful.
Yeah.
It was heartbreaking. It was, I think after you get married, particularly when you get married young, it's not what you immediately think of. And if you get married when you're 30 or something like that, it might be a bit more present on your mind. But we were in our early 20s. We travelled and we did things, and it was a few years. And then we started working towards that goal, and it became apparent that there were problems.
Yeah.
And they were shared, and that began it was about 14 years journey. And
14 years.
14 years.
That's a long time.
Of prayer, disappointment, heartache, loss, and for Jen, watching what it did. Jen was, and I don't know how good blokes are at this one. All I know is I don't know how good I am at it. But you want to. It's hard to help.
Yes.
The way that affects you is one thing. How it affects her is completely different.
Yeah.
And I think, we struggled through all that. It was really hard.
Yeah.
And Danny said something today which was interesting about that. He said they grieved alone, but they healed together.
Yeah.
And, I could have been better at that.
Yeah.
It was really hard. So it was 10 failed treatments and all the rest of it. And then ultimately Jenny, I don't want to go too much into that. It's our sort of private health business. But
totally.
We eventually got there, and both children conceived naturally, and that's why and Abby in particular, and I love God's sense of humour. We're there. Jenny had been in labour for some time. It was the 6th of July when we went in that morning. It's now about 10:30. And it just occurred to me that in 90 minutes, it was going to be the 7th of July, 2007, 777.
Yeah.
And I just laughed.
Yeah.
She goes, what are you laughing at?
There's an inside thought there, Scott.
Yeah. But we should have kept that inside. And then I told her. And it didn't immediately sort of, she was a bit focused on other things at the time. But Abby being born on the 7th July 2007 was just, and I wrote about it when I talked about how God is in your past and in your present and in the future all at the same time. And then I reflected on that many years later, and I thought, well, while I was walking when we were living in Wellington, going on walks, screaming at God in the forest like some mad person because I was so upset and angry, and then him seeing that.
Yeah.
And then seeing at the same time Abby.
Yeah, wow. I don't know how to say this, but I don't really picture you screaming in the forest.
Oh, yeah, well, I was pretty annoyed.
It's one of those.
You got to have arguments with God.
Yeah, you do. That's just such a great story of redemption, Scott.
Not everybody. The hard part for us in being a public couple, in telling the story, is we know in it.
Yeah.
You don't know how that's going to finish.
Yeah.
And it doesn't finish the same way for everybody.
Yeah.
And one of the worst things you hear often when you're in that situation, it'll all work out. Well, you don't know that.
Yeah, that's right.
We didn't know that.
Yeah.
And particularly in my head, I was going, well, I have to think about us, and if it doesn't, and what do we do, and how do we survive, and all of this. But Jenny just was never gave up.
Yeah.
And those children are a testimony to her faith.
How wonderful! What was it like being a local member? Did you like that?
I think the best local members are like pastors, but with sometimes a bigger parish, a bigger congregation.
True.
But they raise complaints just like they do with their pastors,
Yeah.
which I'm sure you recall well, which you respond with love and kindness and understanding.
Yeah, totally.
But I did like the community element,
Yep.
and I still today. I've been out of politics,
Yep.
and they still invite me to come down to the surf club for this event or that event. Oh, so you were with us for so long, and it'd be really nice you came. And so I occasionally will go and do that. I don't want to cramp the style of Simon, who succeeded me, but I'll get down to the footy. I'll get down to and I, just being part of the local community, and I made so many friends in that, and people in our community were so good to us. They really were. It's like, we didn't originally come from there, but once they adopted us, there was no one having a crack at us. And I remember once, I was after I lost the election, and some comedian came and is at the Sutherland Entertainment Centre,
right,
and thought it'd be really funny to have a bit of a crack at me and make fun of me and all the rest of it. These people got up and started shouting at him and said, "That's ScoMo. He's our guy.
Yeah.
If you want to come and do that, mate, take off."
Yeah.
And I heard this story, and I was quite encouraged by it.
Isn't that lovely?
It was nice.
I'm sure
it was very Australian. It was like that. The people don't come up to you. Well, actually, people do come up to you every day, and that's nice. But those sort of people probably would never have maybe had the opportunity to come and see me.
Yeah.
But the fact that they felt so compelled to stand up in the middle of a comedy performance and tell me and heckle on my behalf.
And I think if they were in the Shire, they probably wouldn't have used the words "take off."
No, they wouldn't. No, they would have been a bit more colourful.
I think also, becoming one of the number one supporters of the Sharks would have helped you. That's the Cronulla Sharks Football Club. I mean, that's just another experience in grief and disappointment, really.
It is, this season included.
Yes.
But I was there for the 2016 victory, and that was the first year I was the number one ticket holder. But for me, it was a mental health sort of positive exercise. I loved getting involved, and I still do. I don't go to as many games now, but I watch every game and I follow them closely, and it was a bit of a release for me.
Yeah. When you're in, so your party's now in government, and then everybody, how do I say this? Everybody's jockeying for positions. How do you deal with, you're a Christian, you're following Jesus, you're wanting to be, how do you deal with jockeying for position in that space? Do you just let it go? Do you?
No.
And what about ambition? What does that look like in that environment?
Karl, they're really good questions, and I don't think any Christian in politics can plead a clean sheet on this, me included. Politics is one of the most aggressive, competitive things I've ever experienced. No, it's certainly the most I've ever experienced, and I think it is one of the most in any area of occupation. Everybody's down there, including those on your own side, and everyone's looking to get where they want to get to. Very capable people, and you've got to stand out and perform. And you can. But what I tried to do is learn from my mistakes. Where ambition might have got ahead of me, which led to poor judgment, I try not to make that mistake twice. And over time, that conditioned the way I tried to manage that very issue. So I'm not going to plead, sainthood on this. But over time, I think I did become better at it. And I learnt, at least in my case, because I said I never had a tribe. There was never these massive sort of groups in the Liberal Party who were trying to get me elected leader or anything like that. And I didn't really want that. I just tried. I worked really hard.
Yes. Well, one of the places you worked really hard and were very successful at was the whole Stop the Boats campaign.
Yeah, it worked.
And what's your reflections on that? And also the US connection of seeing what you'd done.
The US connection.
Yeah, were the US looking at what you had done for their southern border at all?
No, the US situation hadn't really got to that level at that point. Ironically, I looked in forming policy back to what the Reagan administration did down to in their south across the waters. They had their own boat crisis. Back then, and I picked up quite a bit of what they did, and I applied it. And the late Jim Mullen was a guy I had helping me with that, and he connected me with a lot of people in the military and so on, which helped us fine-tune our policy. It was a very vexed area of public policy, and for Christians it was hard.
Yep.
And the thing about the policy area was, I think everybody who was trying to solve the problem or had views on the problem, hopefully was coming from the right motivation. And Australia's a welcoming country, but the reason Australia's immigration policy has been so successful is when people are confident that the system works and it's maintained and people don't game it and there are clear rules and there are strong borders, then the immigrant experience in Australia is far more welcoming, far more supportive and far more successful. When that doesn't happen, well, the opposite occurs. And that is a very negative cultural experience.
Yep.
When you get immigration decision wrongs in a society, it impacts for generations. You know, you can spend too much in a budget one year, you can fix it the next year. You get an immigration decision wrong, well, that's lifetime stuff.
That's a generations, or generations, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So my policy was tough, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But it had to be to stop the people smugglers, and the only way I knew how to do that was to smash their business model, which we did. Yeah. They could not get boats to Australia.
And the interesting thing is that your phrase, which a lot of people watching this would object to, and I understand that, but it is a business model, and which is what's happening right now on the channel here in the UK.
Oh, of course. And if you like, I get that people don't want it to be like that.
Yes.
I get that they want there to be another option that isn't as difficult as that one. But you can't, when you're the person who's responsible for it, you don't have the luxury of not solving it. And what I saw on that issue was people spent too much time to solve the politics of the issue. And there were elements of my policy that were not popular, but they were the bits that made it work.
Yeah.
And I knew that within months, potentially, as we went towards the election, well, that was going to be my job within months. Yeah. And if I failed, well, that was it.
Let me go back.
So we got it right, and our opponents, who attacked me for it and all that sort of, well, now they're running my policy.
Yes, that's true.
That was 2013, 13 years ago.
Tell me about, for you, you chatted about this before, and seeing Bruce Baird and John Anderson. Being a Christian in Canberra in the political realm, how was that for you? There's three parts to this question. I want to ask how that was for you. I want to ask about the opposition, and what that relationship was like for Christians, and also the fact that you were probably one of the more early Pentecostal leaders, seen as a Pentecostal leader. So the first one, though, the whole notion of just being a Christian in that environment.
I was another example from Bruce. Bruce used to host in his office a Bible study. Jock Cameron, you probably know Jocko, and he would come down and minister to us, and he'd run that, and he'd been doing it for many years. It was based on a very similar thing that happens to this day in the US Congress. And I took that over from Bruce because he retired, and I came in his seat, and I took that over and worked with Jock, and we did that for the entire time I was in Parliament. And that was. It started off being just every second Tuesday of a sitting week. I think that's what it was. And we ended up doing more frequently. But even when I was Prime Minister, it kept going. Now, I couldn't always be there on a Tuesday night, but I was quite comforted by the fact that every Tuesday night when we were sitting, my Christian colleagues, and they weren't all Christians, by the way, there were some Jewish members there and others, who would be sitting in my office, encouraging each other, praying for each other, reading scriptures. That's what got me through. That fellowship amongst that very tight group of brothers and sisters, and people in Canberra didn't understand it, and other people have written about it in books which haven't been terribly flattering, and they thought this was some sort of religious political faction, which was just nonsense, because I know how everybody voted in that group, particularly on one ballot. And they weren't always for me or for the person I was backing on a particular occasion. We didn't go there to talk about politics. We went there to talk about our relationship, our marriages, our families. And we would often say to each other, I don't know how the other guys do it. Like we get together and we support each other this way. How do they do it?
Yeah.
And it's a very unhealthy environment in Canberra. I mean, this all became somewhat public when I was Prime Minister, that, eventually, and people were all shocked about what was happening down there. This has been happening for 30, 40, 50 years. It was not new.
Yes.
And frankly, it had got a bit better in some respects. But it was still, it can be a very toxic place.
Yeah.
And over my time in politics, the partisanship became more intense. I remember one time, Philip Ruddock, you remember, Philip been in Parliament a long time, and we used to joke, Philip was here during the dismissal, and he was the only one who'd had. And I remember saying to Philip one time earlier in my political career, and we were going through a particularly nasty partisan time, I said, Philip, have you ever seen this before in your time? He said, only once, after the dismissal.
Yeah. And for people, that's the dismissal of Gough Whitlam in 1975.
75.
Yeah.
He said it got to the point where people who knew each other would walk down the corridor past each other and not acknowledge each other. And that was happening again, and I believe it's still happening now. I suspect it's happening now too.
Yeah.
And that's not healthy, but that's how it is.
Yeah. Insight would like to thank Vision Christian Media for their support for this podcast. I've had a long association with Vision, and I can tell you, Vision is 100% committed to helping you look to God daily, wherever you are, across Australia or beyond. I encourage you to make Vision's radio channels, daily devotions and podcasts part of your everyday. You'll be amazed at how much Vision will be able to help you. Just search for Vision Christian Media online or in your app store. I want the whole Pentecostal thing. How did you feel people responded to that? Because I want to remind you of the election campaign, and they allowed. The church allowed people to come into a service where you were worshipping, and you had your hand in the air. It was during a campaign, and there was all these stories written about, this is the end of Scott Morrison, but seeing him in a Pentecostal church.
A month later, we won the election.
I know, and I think the interesting thing, I'll come back to that. The interesting thing is I remember opinion pieces after that where people said, actually, it didn't hurt him. No. It was helpful. So what was
whether
that
it hurt or hindered?
Yeah.
But first of all, I felt as comfortable in your church as I did in my church.
Of course you did.
But I grew up I grew up Presbyterian. I was baptized adult in the Christian Brethren assemblies. I went to Baptist church for many years over in Maroubra and had a wonderful pastor there. So for me, I like to go to a community church. I don't frankly care what denomination it is. So I always sort of not winced, but when people, First Pentecostal Prime Minister, well, no, I don't think of myself. I go to a Pentecostal church and I like it.
Yes.
But I don't think of myself. I think of myself as a Christian who goes to a community-based church that loves the Lord and believes the Bible. And that's all it was for Jenny and I. We don't necessarily think of ourselves in that sort of denominational way. If we moved to another city, like if I lived here in London, I'd probably go to Holy Trinity over in Clapham.
Yes.
It's a great church. I was there on Sunday. Fantastic. So it's not so much about the denomination, but I like that style of worship. I got a lot of, it really helps me. And so what I found really odd about that episode was on Good Friday, this was an Easter Sunday weekend, and it was in the middle of the campaign. And so the cameras were following both me and Bill Shorten everywhere we went. So everything you did every single day was being tracked by and followed by the media. It was Easter Sunday. I was going to church. That's what I was doing that day. And Bill went, I think, to a church in Brisbane with his in-laws. Now, the cameras didn't follow him inside, but on the Good Friday, I had been at the Maronite service, gave a reading, and the cameras were in there too.
Yeah.
And so I was always puzzled by why was going to the Maronite service
not news.
Yeah. But going to the Pentecostal service, apparently that's supposed to frighten people.
Yeah.
I just went to my local church and did what I did every Sunday. Yeah. And as a Christian, I never, my Christian, as my faith was not my politics, but I also thought people had a right to know as a public figure what you believed.
Yeah.
Oh, and my faith is not a political belief. And I think that's often, and many people in the church space make this mistake, thinking there are ultimate Christian positions on every political issue, which is rubbish.
Yes.
Tim Keller, I think, deals with that really, really well. And so there's a tolerance. God gives us some tools. Work it out, guys, and trust me and believe in me. And that's largely how I see it.
So I've jumped forward slightly in the story because you became Prime Minister in a pretty odd situation in a way, in that
It was.
Peter Dutton had made the challenge
To Malcolm.
and
yeah.
Malcolm, and then you sort of slid through the middle. Now, Malcolm Turnbull has written about that since and has a different take.
Yeah.
Was anybody more surprised than you at the end of the day that you came through, or was that something that you
On the
thought
day
would
of the
happen?
ballot, I thought I could win it.
Yep.
But the previous Sunday, it was the furthest thing from my mind.
Yeah, wow.
I admit, I remember talking to Malcolm the previous week, and we heard some rumours that maybe something was going on, and I made some phone calls to some people, as did a few others, all came back negative. Well, it turns out those people weren't being that open with me because they knew I would tell Malcolm. So ironically,
isn't there a thing in politics that if the only person you can trust when you ask them if they're voting for you is the person that says
they're not.
No.
That's right, and that is true. That is true. And so that episode was quite an extraordinary week.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
and events played out as they did, and I've written about it. Malcolm's written about it. Sadly, look, the best account I think was the one Christopher Pine wrote, and it sort of reinforces what I said as well. I wasn't seeking it. I wasn't part of it. In fact, I was one of those who stood with him over the course of the week. Malcolm's since taken a different view. I can't help that. It's just not what happened.
Yeah.
And we'd had a good friendship. I can't say that's the case now, but I loved working with him.
Is there a desire to try and put the record straight, or especially in such public situations? And this has happened to you numbers of times. And you put your piece. Everybody says this or that about. Is it hard to kind of just put it down and go, well,
it's just how it is.
That's what it is.
You can exhaust endless energy on this, and at the end of the day, I just took solace, and this once you leave politics, and I had a sense of this while I was in the job. I could have spent every day trying to do that, correct every wrong thing that was said about me. Even ridiculous things like Engadine Maccas and all this sort of stuff, which was offensive and very disrespectful. And the person who actually originally said it admitted it was a lie just for fun. You can get worked up about that, but I had a country to run. I was dealing with COVID. I was dealing with China. I was dealing with establishing AUKUS. I had a limited time in that job, and when you're in that job, that's what you need to understand. You're not going to be there forever. You've got to make choices about what you're going to focus on. And constantly defending myself did not rank very highly given the other things that were going on. And so I understood that was the choice that I was making, and it was sort of like just toughen up, deal with it. And on the other side, once the music stops, it hurts a bit, but that's the choice you made. And so, and you can't ultimately correct it. When people think what they want to think.
You go home or you go back to your residence, and you're now the Prime Minister, and you're by yourself. What are you thinking?
While I was in the role,
when you got the role.
Oh, when I got the role,
that moment, and then you're overwhelmed with press and all that, and then you reflect on it. What's the overwhelming feeling?
Frankly, the overwhelming feeling is of immense responsibility.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, there is that one singular moment of, oh, wow, when they announced the ballot result. And then from that, okay, we were down 56 to 44 in the polls. The election was at most 8 months away.
Yeah.
And I had to bring this team together and focus on winning an election in that period of time. And so that's just my nature, though, Karl. I just switch into focus mode. I did allow myself, as I got to my feet and got in front of the party room, and a little later that night with some friends at the flat we lived in, who also part of our little fellowship group, and Jen and the girls had come down, and the bunks are down on the floor and all that sort of stuff, and there was a bit of a moment for us to share as a family then and on the following night. But outside of that, it was just all in. I knew how much there was to do
in that election, because you well known for winning the unwinnable election when a couple of other leaders have lost the unlosable election, including your opponent on that occasion. And we won't go back to another Liberal leader who did the same, who I noticed was quite liberal with his advice about how to win an election. But putting that aside, did you think you could win as you started the campaign?
I think the short answer is yes. The short answer is yes. I knew there was a pathway to win. And I used to tell the colleagues all this time, there's a narrow pathway to victory. And I said it in the speech immediately after being elected. There is a pathway. This is not unwinnable. I didn't think it was. None of them believed me. But they knew what mattered is that they believed that I believed it.
How interesting.
And that was important.
That was enough.
You had to say, I'm giving this everything.
Yeah.
And this is either one of the longest suicide missions in Australian politics for the next 8 months, or something quite different. And I was backing the quite different. And they could see me working every day. They could see what I was trying to do. I had a clear narrative, and we had a great work ethic. I had a good team. Josh was amazing, and so many of my other colleagues, Michael McCormick, and we just gave it everything, and we got there. And even on the day, I wouldn't say overconfident, but I knew we could. And one of my favourite times in that campaign, and one of the nice things is, Jenny and I used to campaign together. She was looking at family and that sort of thing on all previous elections. And on this one, though, she was, Prime Minister's wife, and she was there with me for sections. And we're on the plane the last day. This day started in Townsville, went to Cairns, came back to Mackay, and then I rang the federal director, the campaign director, and it was about 1 o'clock by then. I said, "What's going on, mate?" And he said, "Well, Bill's at the pub." And I went, "What?" It's like 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Oh, they're sort of doing this thing where they're having a beer for Hawke, because the Prime Minister Hawke had died just the day before, or just the day or two before. And I went, "Well, mate, we're not stopping." And so we fly down. We went, I think, to Gilmore and Nowra, and then on the way there, Jen said, "We should keep going." And normally on the day before an election, the Prime Minister goes back to their home city.
Yep.
Is that shelters there that night, votes in their election at their local electorate the next day. And so the team said, "Where do you want to go?" I said, "I want to go to Tasmania. I think that's going to be where the election is decided. If we win those 2 seats in Tasmania, we're winning this election." And they went, "Okay, boss." The program people went, "Oh my goodness, what are we going to do?" And so they huddled back to the other part of the plane, trying to organise people and buses, because when the Prime Minister's campaign caravan is big, and there's a lot of logistics. And it was Jen's intervention, said, "You should keep going." And then I decided where we should go, and we went there. It was the first time a Prime Minister had been in Tasmania on election day since Joe Lyons in the 30s, because he was Tasmanian.
Yeah, well.
And it was great to be there. All of Tasmania we were going, "Oh, this is cool. The Prime Minister's actually here. That never happens." And it dominated, the morning media of the day of the election, and we won both of those seats that night. And I remember on the election night, because these days you just have the refresh screen of the AEC, so I just kept hitting refresh on Banks and Braddon. Refresh, and I could see them coming across, and I just grew increasingly confident as the night went on. But a lifetime in not a lifetime, but a long time in politics, you get experience, and God gives you insights. I don't mean by that, He gives you talents and abilities, and you should use them.
Yeah.
And I'd had experience across a range of things, and that helped us make good calls, and that's when I got up on election night and we'd won. I wanted to acknowledge God, but I also was very conscious that, I have to govern for the whole country, and that's why I was just seized of the idea of Abby and Lily, who are both miracle children, being with me, and I talked about how I'm surrounded by miracles, and I talked about the miracle election, and I knew what I was saying.
Yeah.
And it was my way of honouring him in that moment without disrespecting.
Yeah.
It's a secular democracy.
Yeah, totally.
So I thought at least on that one occasion we threaded the needle on the right thing to say. And I've been known for having said many things, not all of them great, but that one I hope will linger.
Yeah, it wasn't really that long later. You're dealing with fires across most of Australia, like the east coast of
it was the
Australia.
following September. That was late May, and the fires started up in Queensland in early September.
Yeah,
which people forget.
It was 100,000 hectares, $100 billion in damages, 24 million hectares, and 33 people died. That's a big weight to carry, because in a way you've got to carry that in a way.
And it just made its way down the east coast.
Yeah.
And Jenny and I had been on fire grounds for months and months with Gladys often,
Yeah.
and we were there with local colleagues, and we were in and out of fire command centres and into shelter areas, and I'll never forget one Taree when. And this was a picture on the front page of the Daily Telegraph the next day. It was me and this old bloke, and we're in this embrace sitting at the chair. But what actually happened, he was talking about, he didn't know where his dog was and all this, and he was really upset and all this. And I said, do you mind if I pray for you? And he said, please. And so we're in this embrace, and I'm praying for this guy. And he really appreciated it. Yeah. And he made sure he got a note back to me when he finally got home to let me know his dogs were okay, which was nice.
That's
but
great.
I often did that, and that was misrepresented. That on occasions when I've sort of told that story, they sort of leave the bit out that I asked. I can quietly pray in my head for people. That's fine. But if you're going to pray out loud with them, then of course you have to ask them.
Yes.
And I did that with many people in those circumstances, in floods and fires, and they found it quite comforting. And if secular journalists who don't like Christianity don't like it, well, tough. Yeah. It was not about them. It's about the people I was trying to comfort and help.
We're about to talk about COVID in a moment, but I just want to go back to when I ran a church, and I'm not trying to pretend that running a church is anything like being the Prime Minister of a nation, but there's a few similarities. One is that often people who are not happy with how life was or how the church was, I became the focus of their attention. And every now and then you had to go home and go, I'm wearing this almost for our church in Christianity. And that must be true as a Prime Minister.
It's 100% true.
Yeah.
And as a politician, particularly in those environments, and I had some particularly during the fires, there were some angry people on occasion. And I went to some places when people were probably still they were pretty raw. And you got to just accept that they're hurting. Mm. It's not personal. They're just hurting, or they're exhausted, or any of these things. And you cop it. That's leaders cop that stuff, and they don't whinge and complain about it. I'm sure we'll talk about COVID, but I mean, I found myself in that situation many times. You were the leader, even if you didn't agree with what some of the states were doing, which I often didn't, particularly on schools and things like that, and vaccine mandates and so on. But they had the powers. But I had to ensure that the country, as best as you could, was remaining as united as possible. And sometimes that meant I had to suck up some of the political punishment to keep the whole team looking loosely together. Now, that didn't always occur, but I tell you what, we did it a lot better than every other federation on the planet.
Yeah. Did it become overwhelming? Because when you looked at, I remember watching a documentary, kind of, news story come documentary on northern Italy.
Oh, yeah, I think I watched the same one.
And that was horrific. And
was this on Sky? I think
it might have been.
Yeah, I know exactly the one you're talking about.
And it was just, there are younger people lying on their chests on beds.
Yes.
Can't breathe. When I watch that, I'm like, well, that's terrible. I'm not the Prime Minister now. So
I remember watching that. I was in the lodge that evening. I'd been, it'd been a long day, and it was in our room. Jenny was there, and I was watching this on the screen and transfixed. I'd been getting all the intelligence, all the information, so I was aware. But here it was being visually in front of me, seeing people gasping for breath and dying in a developed country with a hospital system.
Yep.
And, there's a lot of hindsight after the fact and a pretense that things was never as bad as it was. That's all rubbish. People were dying.
Yep.
Mass graves were being dug. Hospital systems in developed countries were falling over. And I remember on that night saying to Jenny, that's Italy. Imagine when this thing hits Indonesia, when it hits India. They'll just be laying the bodies in the middle of the village, which I think actually did happen.
Yep.
It wasn't called COVID, but they just would have no ability to respond to this thing. And, one of the hardest things, I just had to ignore all the ideological rubbish people were going on about. Oh, it's a threat to our liberties and all this. I think it's a pathogen. It doesn't vote.
Yes.
It has no politics. It has no moral character one way or the other. And it's coming to wipe out some very vulnerable people and some not so vulnerable as well. And I got to say, of all the things, my time in politics, it happens every day. Someone will come to me and say, thank you for saving my business, for saving my family or saving whatever. And I really appreciate them saying it. And they always say the same thing. They go, oh, look, someone probably never tells you this. And I go, you'll be pleased to know that someone does.
Yeah.
And I get it at the end of COVID. It was just an awful time for us all. And people wanted to move on.
Yeah.
And me going, frankly, I think was part of that. And that happened to Jacinda Ardern. It happened to Donald Trump. It happened to, I remember I saw Donald when it was between terms and we caught up in New York. I said, well, mate, COVID got us all eventually. And it was true. Got Boris, you know, it was such a tumultuous physical event. It was a 1 in 100 year event. The scale of the economic shock, I think Josh told me one day on the numbers, it was like 26 times worse than the GFC.
Wow. Gosh.
Just the scale of the drop in global growth. And our economic response was second to none in the world. In fact, our economy was bigger after COVID than it was before. Our unemployment was lower than it was before. And that didn't happen by accident. Josh and I and Matthias and Greg Hunt and Michael McCormick, and we pulled together a really good economic plan which got people through. And I'll never forget the day we announced JobKeeper. Josh and I were very conscious that this had to work. People were losing hope and they were scared. And I mean, that doesn't mean they were scared of getting COVID. I mean, the number of stories I've heard that happened like that people were getting ready to walk into work on that day and sack their staff and not knowing whether their business would ever open again. And Josh and I, particularly Josh and I and Matthias, had developed this package on JobKeeper, and from the minute we did it, the confidence shifted, and we knew we'd hit the mark, and then people sort of got the message: we're going to be okay, we're going to get through with it. So we just got to put up with all this rubbish for all. And Australians, I'm very grateful, were so forbearing, and that was borrowed on, I think, by some policies that were pursued. And I don't really want to get into that, but I do think every leader at the time was trying to do their best. Whether they got it right or wrong, they were trying really hard, and I know they were. That doesn't mean I agreed with everything they did, or probably they agreed with what I did all the time, but they were trying really hard.
Let me ask, in your book, when I was reading through your book, what I found interesting was the one place that you talked about an emotional response that I can remember was when you were tabling the outcomes of the Royal Commission into the institutional abuse of children. And that Julia Gillard started that. But it was tabled under your time.
Correct.
And then you met with a bunch of the people.
I did.
And so what was that like?
Oh, that was probably, I mean, there were some pretty emotional days. So, I mean, we started talking about the Abdallahs. We've been through bushfires. We've been through COVID. That was early on. That was in 2018. And to Julia's great credit, she initiated that process. And one of my closest friends in the Parliament had a connection with this whole issue and being adopted and various things. So I had some understanding of it through a friend. I can't pretend to know otherwise. And I'll never forget, I gave the speech, and I was very conscious that this speech mattered a great deal to those. I didn't really care what everyone else thought of it. It mattered to what they would think. And I'd met with them before, and my speechwriter had as well. And I think we did a pretty good job at trying to communicate to them just how sorry the country was about it, and that we understood their pain and their hurt. And that was bipartisan, and Bill was really good on that too. And anyway, so we went from there, then we went into the Great Hall, and they were all there. I've never walked into a room, and I could feel it spiritually.
Wow.
It's coming back to me as we speak. It was almost overpowering. There was so much hurt. There was so much pain. And, you're just hugging people, and because they wanted someone to hug them. And I made my way to the platform with Bill, and we're there, and I had to speak again. You're trying to find the words, and I went, I just read. I said, I'm just going to read to you what has just been proclaimed. And I held Bill's hand, and I asked everybody to hold hands in the whole place.
Yep.
I just felt led to do that and to create something that would bind this aggressive, I'll say it, spirit that was in the room. And I declared this thing over the room, and it was very powerful, and I hope it helped people. And then after that, we made our ways down on the lawns where there were more people, and I saw a mate who I'd gone to school with, and it sort of surprised me a bit. And he shared his story with me, and I met a lot of people, and we hugged a lot of people, and we sat with a lot of people and cried with a lot of people. And then I was walking back up to Parliament House, and we sat down. I just shut the doors. I rang Bill on the way back because he'd been out there too.
Yeah.
I said, mate, question time was at 2:00. I think it was about 1:15 at this time. And I said, mate, I don't know about you, but after that, I don't think today we can do politics as usual.
Yeah.
We can't.
Yeah.
I don't know how you are. I know I am, and I don't think we should. And to his great credit, he said, I know what you mean. Let me just call someone. I'll call you straight back. He called back and said, let's not do it today. And good for Bill. And so I got back to my office and I just shut the door, wouldn't let anyone in. I just wept.
Wow. Because it's, we talk about all these moments as sort of theatrical and stuff, but there's something deep within you that you're feeling all of that pain.
That room and I was just getting a glass through dimly on someone, but not even that good. I was just getting a sense of it for that moment, and they were living with this every day, and it was evil what had been done to them.
It is interesting that sometimes we dismiss symbolism, but like in a sense that was like symbolically really important.
Symbols do matter.
Yeah.
Symbols alone don't.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Because then it's just glib. I supported all the apologies, including to Indigenous Australians, because it mattered to the people who needed to hear it. And it mattered to our country. And yes, of course, that didn't solve Indigenous disadvantage in the country, and the gap had to be closed and all of these things. But it still did matter. Yeah.
And it was one of my first things I had to deal with when I came into the Parliament. And I remember I asked my aunt, who had a wonderful relationship. They'd lived up in the Northern Territory, and she'd been, working in Indigenous communities, as had her then husband, down in Wreck Bay. And so they understood. And I remember before I went to Parliament asking her views on it. And I said, why do you think I should do this? She goes, because it matters to them.
Yeah.
It wasn't about what I thought, believed. It mattered to them. And it did matter to them. And I remember there was I'm trying to remember his name. He's since passed away, but he came down from the Shire for it. And Deanna Schreiber, I think, was down there, and you remember Auntie Diana, but it was one of the other chaps who came down, and he heard I was there, and I brought him up to Parliament. We saw each other, and it meant the world to him.
Yeah, it's not fabulous.
So good on you, Kevin.
Yeah.
Well done, Kevin. That was a moment I truly believe God put him in that Parliament to do.
Yes.
And he and I have discussed that issue in quite a bit of depth, actually, and I have nothing but admiration and respect for him doing that.
Yeah. Through all this period of time and, the criticism around the fires and stuff that you were dealt, how did Jenny go with that? Because I don't notice that, often the leader themselves deal with it, but their partner.
Oh, it's way worse for your family. Yeah. It's way worse. You build up a callus in politics, and it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt you later. It actually hurts you a lot more once you leave, when all the things fall away and you sort of remember some of these things. And it does take a toll on you. You're just not aware of it at the moment. Adrenaline and all those sort of things tend to get you through. But your family, it doesn't. And Jen did a wonderful job, largely shielding our very young girls over my time in politics from being exposed to a lot of that, but not always could she do that. But it was very hard for her and because, a lot of that criticism, I'm sort of not going to go over it again, but it was politically motivated, superficial stuff. The stuff of politics, the demonising of character, all of this sort of thing to try and take you down to win an election. That's politics.
Yes.
And that's on my forgiveness list too. And, I'm not all the way there on that one, but I'm getting there.
How's the girls?
The girls are wonderful.
Yeah.
They're wonderful, beautiful young women. Abby's now an adult, and Lily's almost out of high school. And they're completely different. They've got their own passions and interests.
Haven't joined a political party yet?
I hope not. Or become a journalist. They're the two things that they're totally agreed upon. And I'm not sure which they dislike least.
Yeah.
They don't mind they met many wonderful politicians and all that sort of thing. And my girls, yes, they had a lot to deal with an absent father for a lot, and the pressure with Jen and all the rest of it. But they also had a bit of a unique experience too, which not many young people have. And I think they appreciate that as well. But they're a lot like their mum. They're a lot more shy. They don't seek the limelight or anything like that. I remember on the night we won, poor Lily, she was such a little girl. It was like 12:30 at night, and she's straining to keep her eyes open. And the cameras are going off everywhere. Abby was all right. She brightened up. But Lily was like a little girl trying to keep her eyes open. And poor thing. There's a few photos which are a bit funny.
Yeah.
Which we make sure aren't out there.
When you watch people in the Prime Minister's position, there's planes, there's cars, there's endless security, endless meetings. What's it like now wandering around London by yourself?
Awesome. It's awesome. And particularly when I'm overseas. I mean, I spend most of my time when I'm working overseas, whether here or in the United States or in Europe or Japan or Singapore or wherever, India. And there, you're not a household face or name. Here, you bump into a lot of Aussies. In the US, you do too. And that's always pleasant. But it's nice. And in Australia, I mean, my friends in America who served, Mike Pompeo and Mike Pence, and these guys, they don't all have a lot of that anymore because of some of the decisions the president took. But the risk to the political figures in the United States is real.
Is enormous, yeah.
But in Australia, thank God,
that's
not our society. I mean, it's not our character. It's not our culture. We don't exist at the scale where those types of things towards political figures have been a practice. It doesn't mean it can't happen. And I had death threats when I was there. Politicians now have death threats. But once the game's over, people sort of move on. But in the United States, no. Mind you, there's a few parts of the world I won't go to. I'm still banned. I was proudly in the first batch that got banned from ever visiting Russia because of my position on Ukraine.
Yes.
So I wear that proudly.
I'm sure that's not a great loss for you.
Yeah.
Are you enjoying life post-politics, post-prime ministerial leadership?
Short answer is yes, because I'm back home, back in the Shire, back with my family, and making up for a lot of lost time.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not moving the same pace. And being in those roles it's hard to explain. If you have an opportunity to positively influence something every day, and that's a great privilege. It's a great responsibility. You age a lot. It affects your health. It affects relationships, all those sort of things. That's all true. You don't whinge about it. It's just that comes with the territory. It's the price that you willingly and pay. But so that's obviously exhilarating, and it's obviously a wonderful opportunity. But I always felt my time in politics was for a season. There are seasons. Louise Marcus, who I don't see Louise sadly much these days. She lives on the other side of the city and so on. But I remember when Louise left the Parliament, she goes, "Well, that season's done. There's a new one starting." And I think you've got to take that attitude in politics. You're there for a season. And I remember the day after I lost the election, Brad asked me to speak. And I said, well, it was for such a time as that. And that was a time, and we were privileged to be able to have that. But now we have a new time.
Yeah. And what is this new time? What do you do? I'm sure this is highly confidential.
Not really.
Business.
It's all business advisory, geopolitics,
okay.
And, different sectors, security, defence, finance, and so on. When you're a prime minister, and not forgetting, prior to that, I was 3 years the treasurer and several years before that in cabinet in other roles. You developed an immense amount of experience across a lot of different areas and insights and met a lot of people. So you tend to come at problems quite uniquely to a lot of others. So, and there's quite a demand for that sort of thing. And I've connected with others who do that. And so I do that around the world, and that's interesting. But it's nowhere near at the pace. I mean, when I would travel here previously, you would every second of the day was carved out. But these days, thankfully, I can take things at a bit of a better pace and be a lot healthier and a lot more intentional about relationships and faith. And so that's why I enjoy doing the stuff I do with Danny and Layla at I Forgive. I don't do too many of those because, I've still got girls at uni and going through school. The times in politics were not the most commercially rewarding. So you got to catch up a bit there. And so we're doing that, and we're just being together. Yeah. Took a while for them to let me back in.
Is that right?
Well, you hadn't been around for a while. You weren't in there making all those decisions which they had to make, and you had to earn your place back at the table.
Isn't that interesting? I hadn't really thought about that.
Yeah, it was cheeky.
Yeah.
It wasn't disrespectful or unloving or anything like that. But it was sort
of like you turn up, it's like, oh, you want an opinion?
So you can wait a while. Teenage daughters.
Well,
teenage Scott, daughters.
Every Australian.
We love them.
Whatever politics you've got, every Australian wants to thank you for your service and the being in that leadership role through a incredibly difficult time. Yeah. And it's good to see you doing well. And if the Sharks could win more often, you'd even be happier. So, Scott Morrison, thank you.
That would be a miracle.